everyone, welcome back to the Sources Say with Julie Grace podcast. Today we've got Mark Moran, former Senate candidate and former contestant on HBO's FBoy Island. So we're excited to talk to him. Hey Mark, thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate the intro and looking forward to it. This is great, Julie Grace.
So you recently decided to opt out of running for Senate. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what your decision was on that.
Absolutely. So I was primarying Mark Warner, the wealthiest senator who's going on his fourth term. He was running unopposed. And I initially was going to run for Congress in Northern Virginia, where I'm from, where I live now, where my parents still live. And then we ran a poll in December with some of the consultants that I had. It showed that people were ready for a change from Warner. And so I thought, if no one else is going to do this, let me throw my hat in the ring and see. It ended up being a fascinating introduction to politics that I very quickly realized that I was up against forces that were much more well-resourced than myself. I started getting cut off from college campuses for speaking engagements with the college Dems, and even at my alma mater, William & Mary and UVA. And then I started to think, okay, I'm hearing kids are getting internships from the Warner campaign right before I'm set to speak. Then my stuff gets canceled. Interesting. Then
you think that's why you got from speaking campuses?
I don't know. I would love to FOIA some emails, so we'll see where things go. I always thought, hey, in politics, you should be able to win on your ideas. But I started doing very well, and we have debates. Warner doesn't show up. Then I had someone infiltrate my campaign who I thought was just a nice, down-home, good old boy. And turns out the signature petition gatherers, because in the Commonwealth of Virginia, you need 10,000 signatures to get on the ballot. The guy who he referred me to, I'm flipping through him a few days before April 2nd when I'd have to turn these in. I started to see my own name there. The handwriting's looking familiar. And so I referred those to various government agencies. The FBI is looking into it now, because if I were to turn those in, they would have gotten vetted by the Democratic Party. So you turn them into the Board of Elections, the Democratic Party vets them. So they either could have ruined me right there or held that over me. So I saw that as I'm not going to play that game. And also at that time, I was persona non grata with the Democratic Party. However, just given the time that none of the 10,000 signatures I had would be able to be valid, I thought, okay, I've learned what I need to do. I see the forces and kind of saw the game from the inside. And so I look at it as a nice warm-up act for me.
I mean, would you say you still identify as a Democrat? I feel like I vaguely remember seeing headlines that you had left the party.
Yeah, I'm an independent now. I identify with the party of that stands up for the little guy, the one that stands up to corporations, that stands up for unions against data centers, that makes it so that your average working individual can have hope, can create a future where they can actually afford things. And I look at it as I'm very off-put by both parties, but specifically the Virginia Democratic Party, that I wonder what the actual change they're trying to accomplish is, rather than just keeping people within power. And I have my McDonald's delivery, so one of my dogs is going to bark. Now the other is. That's Kennedy. She's a 14-pound mini shot. Kennedy is all right.
I haven't had McDonald's in a while. It kind of sounds good.
And then Kennedy, say hi. And then Roosevelt is a 19-pound mini Labradoodle. I know.
We love to be surprised. Guess in the pod.
Okay. Say hi. Say hi. Okay, sorry about that.
You're good. Okay, so I guess Tucker Carlson announced this week that he's left the party. I guess, what do you make of that? Do you think more people are going to shift independent? But I kind of wanted to get your hot take on.
45% of Americans identify as independent, and that's something that I see only increasing. You have a fracturing on the right that you have MAGA, traditional GOP, but specifically when you break down the fracturing on the left and on the right, much to a less degree on the left, but it's by age, and especially Gen Z coming up. Part of my thesis in this of having been on a reality TV show is I knew that there would be a influencer class of politicians that would come in, and people have said that it's me and Spencer Pratt, and that's a narrative that I saw back during COVID would happen. Because when you think about politics, it's essentially a reality TV show, something you and I have discussed before. And that attention is the currency. So you see the people in office attempting to compete with outsiders who can gain more traction and attention. But why is that? The mediums are different in terms of communication now, right? I mean, look at what you're doing with this, that people get their news from different sources. And so the same narratives, the same essential manipulation of the American people can't happen. So I look at it as we're still years away from an independent party or independent candidates being able to ascend to the heights of federal office in a meaningful way. However, the groundwork is building, and I think that you're going to start to see more of a coalition of independents who are able to utilize the same infrastructure and resources, because that's one of the main things in a campaign. If you're not part of the traditional two-party system, you're going to be cut out from infrastructure and resources, whether it be something like an NGP van to contact voters, to text voters, to be able to do phone calls, but even just the traditional consultants, because they pick their side. And so it's something that, in my opinion, I was a little bit early in terms of jumping on this. However, I knew that I always wanted to be one of the first ones to push this narrative. And I saw firsthand how easy it was to, Kennedy, thank you, how easy it was to, she doesn't listen to me, how easy it was to be able to control the narrative. And that the more controversial you are, the more you irritate people, which I tend to just innately do with people, then the more attention you get. And it's just a snowball effect.
I feel like a good thing for politics, though. I feel like one of the big complaints I hear up here in Congress all the time is from members are like, people are coming up here to get famous. They're not focused on the policy. I feel like that's kind of like been a running theme of almost every member of Congress I've talked to on this podcast in the past. I mean, what do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, I always thought that the best ideas should win. However, I don't believe that is the case. And essentially why I structured the past 6 years of my life to make decisions that many people at the time questioned, having gone on a untitled reality TV show after being an investment banker that ends up being called FBoy Island. But it's part of learning the attention economy. And so unfortunately, to have name notoriety, you don't get it through ideas. You get it through being controversial. You get it through essentially throwing darts at the wall and seeing what hits. And
from getting taken seriously as a candidate, though, or I mean, now that you've tried doing it and moving forward, I don't know if you want to run again, but from going on a show called FBoy Island to being able to be somebody who can articulate policy ideas and platform.
Yeah. Well, I think setting the bar low is a key thing in life, right? So then, hey, when you barely exceed it, you already exceeded expectations. But one of the things is I'm very comfortable with anyone having whatever opinion they want to have on me. But then once I'm able to talk, especially at length upon certain policies, that's where I think the beauty happens. And that's where I've found in candidate forums, in speaking to local Democratic clubs outside of Northern Virginia, because one of my goals was really to represent the people outside of Northern Virginia and the elite political consulting class who I felt like weren't listened to. And then they listen because they have no one else who's willing to go to bat for them. And it's something that I realized this is it is a process to put yourself out there and then have perception and then mold perception to reality. So it's something that involves a lot of effort. I definitely will run again in the future. However, it's also going to take continuing to be in the limelight. One of the pushbacks against me was having been an investment banker. However, I look at that as one of my greatest strengths, having done 75 billion of M&A, being able to see from the inside out how corporations have taken control of America and how they have so much more power than the individual, which I think is the main thing the founding fathers didn't anticipate, because the corporations were limited in size, duration, geographic focus at the time of the founding of this country. And now we have a system where politicians can be bought, they can be sold, and that the corporations can always get what they want through lobbying. And part of what has led us to this almost cataclysmic point where everyone knows something is wrong, but how do we fix it? And everyone says campaign finance reform, but you're not going to get a 28th Amendment anytime soon, right? And it takes I think, a emboldened group of individuals that I think would be framed as independent candidates who know how to command attention that will ultimately push this kind of Overton window into place and then break it. That I'm not sure if it's the left or the right that will first be broken, but I think that massive movements are ahead of us, especially when it comes to Gen Z, because with each passing day, the boomers die off and Gen Z and millennials become a more significant voting bloc. And once we're able to reach that with participation, then I think it's game over, that you're going to start to see most people identify as independents and then compete on ideas, which I think is exactly what Washington would have wanted when he warned about the fracturing, the division of the American people if we fall into a party system.
Now, as somebody who's used social media as a big part of kind of gaining notoriety and getting your name out there, I mean, after you kind of toyed publicly with running as an independent, I mean, all over X, all over social media, you had people arguing that you were a MAGA plant, accusing you of being on Grinder, all sorts of other
Hmm.
there. I mean, how do you navigate that, and how do you, I guess, get your ideas when you've kind of got a ton of people out there
Yeah.
attacking, trying to paint that kind of
Well, and
picture
it's
of it?
like a fascinating thing because you're just like, what? Where are we getting these? It's like I'm looking at like text. I'm like, so someone screenshots my profile and then just sends like, this isn't even believable. Like, if we're gonna do this, do better. But it's the internet, so volume is the thing that matters, right? Now, one thing I have learned on this, the bot farms that people have are wild. And so we do really have to question what we see on social media, but it's something that people are very swayed by it who are online. It doesn't affect I would say at this point 55-60% of voters, but specifically what I learned is that it is the primary voters who median age is about 65 for a primary voter, right? So you're overwhelmingly removed from social media. Your narratives there won't really matter. And if they do, it should be on Facebook or Nextdoor, which is a wild app if you've ever explored that one. Insane. But Twitter, like where I live, it doesn't really do much. And so it's like everyone's always going to have something to say or a theory. But like I love the MAGA plant one, and I think it was more, I look a certain way. However, anyone who would think that my views are of that nature just clearly doesn't have anything to listen to. But it becomes an overwhelming narrative for certain cohorts, right? Then I look at the internet, but social media specifically is like you're ping ponging off attention, right? So bad attention, people saying whatever, that can actually be a good thing if you can then hit the kind of next silo and then bring that up and redirect it and redirect it. So I looked at it as, this isn't going to actually help me put my message out there about data centers, about a 28th Amendment, about how the US Postal Service touches most of the people in America and is significantly underutilized. But having been a healthcare banker, when I would go to these rural towns and I talk to them and be like, look, this is all because of private equity. And then what's going to happen? They say the hospital is not going to close. It's going to close. They'll divvy off the assets, run it into the ground. People would listen in person. The internet's a totally different thing. So the main thing I learned is that it's really about, you need a longer duration, a longer runway in a campaign to get there in person. Like almost how Plattner in Maine was able to really, like, from when he first started, hit these small town halls that then grow and grow and grow. And so I would say that was one of the main learning things, that it really has to be done in person at length over and over and over again rather than social media.
Let's talk about your time in reality TV. What do you see as the parallels between politics and being on reality television?
In both, you have to play an aggrandized version of yourself. I very much do that online, but any politician does do that, right? Some try to temper themselves in a way or with a false modesty that I think we're moving away from. However, I would say the biggest thing is you have producers on reality TV, right? Individuals who are behind the scenes who are essentially saying, that person said this about you, or I think you should go for this girl, or you know, why not just interrupt this date right now, right? And that's the same in politics that you have lobbyists, you have donors, and everyone has their own ambitions in life, right? The producers on a reality TV show, they want to go to the next one. And I was fortunate on FBoy Island to really have learned from some of the best reality TV producers. Alon Gale produced the show, who he did The Bachelor for 15 plus seasons, but really turned the Bachelor franchise into what it is. This show, F Boy Island, it was essentially supposed to be a parody of The Bachelor when they go to the beach, whatever that's called. You know what I'm talking about?
Like when they pull people away, or like when it's
No,
where like
like there's like a
when they
beach
have
episode,
everything.
like a beach season of The Bachelor, Bachelor in Paradise. It was
Like,
supposed to be a parody of that, right? And so I'm working on Wall Street. I don't like my job. And I got my bonus. So I go up to my cubicle and I go on Hinge immediately, December of 2020. And I match with a woman who's like, hey, now, I don't live in New York and I have a boyfriend, but have you ever thought about doing reality TV? And I'm like, no way. I'm not going to screw up my life. I don't watch TV. I'm definitely not going on reality TV. Well, it starts as a joke, and I end up like negotiating my contract, and they're like, HBO never negotiate with I can't. I'm like, I didn't apply for this show. You guys sought me out, which means you're looking for a stereotypical white male, in finance to be a douchebag. And I was able to negotiate everything in terms of when I'd be eliminated. There were in the contract, I believe it was good guys and bad guys, which ended up being nice guys and F boys. So I knew I was a good guy. But it was something that I thought, this is all preparation, right? Like, I know that when you jump off this cliff in terms of public attention or just putting yourself out there, there's no going back, but also everyone will have their own opinion of you. And as someone who very much had tried to control my opinion, do all the right things, go to the right schools, get the right degrees, I just wanted to see what life was like. And I did it. It was a great training ground. Afterwards, my thesis was, no one has become like the face of finance. There are anonymous accounts, but I was able to do that given my background and where I worked and the experience I had that built trust with an audience, but was able to really do that. And so I've always viewed social media as an experiment, but it was one that reality TV was just it was a phenomenal learning experience because
I mean, how
you
much
really,
reality TV is bullshit behind the scenes of like what's finally put out there of like images of people, and how much of
oh
it
my
is real?
God. Okay, I'll give you an example. So it's like when you go on a date. I go on a date with one of the girls in the show. I don't even know what episode it's in, and it's like 9 hours, but it gets shown for 45 seconds on the on TV right after the actual cut. And so it's like, you're taking breaks during this. Like, she's going to her producers. I'm sitting there with mine. I'm like, this clearly, I could tell like this wasn't supposed to go well, and I'm screwing it up. Like, we had drones flying over in this Jeep she was driving, and then we would have to stop. Some guy come drive the Jeep up on rocks and then park it and act like she had done that. It was just so wild. But you realize that reality TV is fascinating because you're picking people based off of a few interviews, right? Almost like politics, a few interactions, a few candidate forums, but you don't fully know. And then the producers kind of have ideas of how someone will react, but they've also seen people cycle in and cycle out of this, right? There end up being reality TV stars and not like one of my producers, Dory. In Jersey Shore, there's like a note that Snooki, right? So
Yeah,
Dory wrote that note. And so like they're like the best
people
to ever
are
do it. And so you just start to realize like, oh, this is like none of this is real, right? And that's how I look at politics.
What is faker in reality? Politics.
Oh, politics. Because in reality TV, you just I mean, people like me who go in and you watch it to just make fun of people and be like, I love watching 90 Day Fiance. That guy, Big Ed, is hilarious, right? It's like, at least I'm not that guy. Like, I'm me, but at least I'm not that guy, right? And there's just something so fascinating about that show. Like, that's the only one I watch. But with politics, it's like Lindsey Graham. I mean, you can go on Twitter and see what people have to say about it. But it's like, what are we hiding here, man? Like, we don't live in 1990 anymore. Just say you're gay. That's fine. Nobody cares. And it's just wild. It's almost like politics up to now, it was designed to have the person who like was your high school class president rise to the top, like the person who would act perfect, who would then probably have some sexual tendencies that would get them compromised to a point that then they're not able to actually do anything other than what whoever is compromising them wants them to do. Whereas reality TV, I think it allows for imperfection more, but we're Americans. We actually love imperfection, right? And when you look at, like, I always look at Ulysses S. Grant as someone who, he's 37. The rumors are he's an alcoholic. He's working at his father's leather tannery. He hates it. He hates the smell of leather. And the wife's like, what are you going to do with your life? And then the Civil War breaks out. He ends up joining, but because he went to West Point. He graduated 29th out of 31 in his class at West Point, where Robert E. Lee was second. And then the wife's like, you need to make something of your life. And he's like, I'm a loser. So he joins the union. They sent him in a clerical position for 3 weeks. And he recorded, he's like, I'm thinking about killing myself, jumped out of the third floor window. And it's like, wow, what a guy at 37 to then turn it on, essentially unite the country, become president. And that's like the American story that I believe in, that I think people want. And so I look at it as like, that's essentially like our narrative arcs, right? And politics has missed the narrative arc of maturation, of growth, of character development, of being able to say you're wrong too on an issue. And we're going to see the change of that, right? Of individuals.
Example.
What's that?
That's a wild, deep cut of an example. But it's like, what do you make? I mean, you brought up Graham Plattner earlier, and I mean, I've talked to a lot of Democrats that are worried about that race and his entire image and whether he's got the moral character to be able to hold that position. I mean, what do you make of him?
Yeah, he is kind of fascinating to me because I would love to have a drink with him. But he's really gotten it because it's almost as if the consultant who picked him, that he was a bartender in DC, I guess, when these people met him, and they kind of bring him up. But where did he go? Choate? Like, come on. Like, don't do this working class thing to me when you go to Choate for prep school, high school, 4 years, $70K a year, and he's an oysterman. Like, that's where I have a real problem with it, of that narrative that was like falsely developed. The Reddit post, look, there's always going to be shit on Reddit stuff, right? Then there's always going to be people saying you're cheating on your wife. Like, that's like the traditional playbook. And so I would never judge, having that thrown at me, I would never judge someone for that. But it is the background thing of having gone to Choate or whatever comparable prep school, if I'm misquoting that. And I'm not sure how that will go down, because it's almost as if with him, there is kind of these tiered responses to him. Like, he's advancing too far, and then boom, 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 we'll try to cut you down. And he's a great litmus test, right? I think Spencer Pratt was a great litmus test, but he is too, because also he hasn't responded in a way where he really acknowledges all this. Like, where I think he would go viral is if he just sat down with a camera and was like, yeah, this is true, this isn't, I don't know what the hell this is, and just like actually acknowledge them, because they keep moving forward with their narratives, and it's good. He's able to go into a room of old people in Maine and say the right things. But my larger thing is, it's like, in seeing a lot of other candidates at these forums, I would hear the same thing over and over. I wouldn't hear new ideas. And I just want to live in a political world where the person with the best ideas, the ones that maybe we didn't even think of, could rise to the top. But that's not allowed right now. And so I look at him as almost, he's a product of the establishment because I don't think he would have done this without these consultants coming to him, which is how most people are picked with this. I mean, a great movie, Robert Redford, the candidate, 1982 or something. That's exactly how it happens. And I think most sane people be like, I would never want to be a politician. Why would I want to subject myself or my family to that? But a lot of people, once you get hand selected, then why not do it? But I'm going to be
Do you think
fascinated
he should win?
with what happens.
Do you
I
think
think
he
he
should
will.
win? You
I
think he
think he
would?
should win. I think he should win. I the Nazi tattoo thing, I don't know enough of it. The thing that makes me laugh the most is there was something of like, the dating groups of like, is this guy dating like my husband or whatever, or my multiple women? And then someone's like, I don't want to hear anything more about this guy or what he does in his free time. And I thought, like, that's how most people feel.
I mean, you brought up Spencer Pratt. What was your opinion of his whole campaign?
I loved it. I mean, I totally think there's voter fraud. The fact when you look at Skid Row and all of these these homeless people, like I've watched multiple videos, as I'm sure you have, of homeless people being paid $2 to do this. Like that's how much our democracy costs, $2. I think voter fraud is a much bigger thing. We can get into that later. But I loved his campaign because this is a real guy who is by far not perfect in America's eyes, right? Because most people only know him from their perception of him in the hills. And then something traumatic happens to him. He gets angry and he decides he's going to change something. Like if you look at Charlie Wilson, he says the day I fell in love in America was the day he got his next door neighbor to not get elected again because he killed his dog. And so he drove people in from the other side of town to get them to vote. And, if it's a fair game, it's a fair game. If there's voter fraud, there's voter fraud. But he played it in a way where his true passion and anger came out. And that's what I think Americans want to feel.
So my last question for you, since we're running a little long,
Yeah.
If you had to pick one reality TV show that is most like the political climate of today, what would it be?
That's a phenomenal question. One reality show that's most like the political climate of today. Oh, American Idol season 3. That show is the most American show that Fantasia Barrino, Clay Aiken, Ruben Studdard. I mean, it's the dude from Rockingham, VA. I don't even know his name, but it was perfect and it captured America's attention, right? And Carrie Underwood, some stars were made, but it was broadly encompassing and each person had their own story. Each person was vying for America's attention. And when you think about it, there are judges. There are 3 judges. It's like we got James Carville, Tucker Carlson. We have very few people to distill down all that's going on. But that's essentially the role of the judges. They're the media, the simplify. Simon Cowell, like what a character, right? So I'd say American Idol season 3 is exactly on par with what American politics is.
I love it. Well, Mark, thank you for joining us. We've got to have you back on.
No, this is great. Absolutely. Thanks so much, Julie Grace.
And everybody, thank you for tuning in and make sure to catch our newsletters on Thursday on sourcessay.news.